The rain was hitting my windshield pretty hard when I sat in that dark parking garage, staring at my phone screen showing 23 missed calls. Just 2 days earlier, my boss Walter Kingsley had looked me straight in the eye and told me I wasn't ready for a promotion. Now everyone at Nova Dynamics was calling me like the entire building was on fire. My name is Arthur Vance. I'm 54 years old, and until that conversation with my boss, I thought I knew exactly where my life and career were heading. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things. I've been at Nova Dynamics for 8 years now. Before that, I spent 12 years in the Navy handling logistics operations. When you're responsible for getting critical supplies to ships halfway around the world, you learn pretty quick that details matter. Every system, every process, every backup plan, they all have to work perfectly or people get hurt. That mindset served me well in corporate America, maybe too well. When I first started at Nova Dynamics, the operations department was a complete disaster. My predecessor had left without any documentation, no handover notes, nothing. It was like walking into a house where someone had cut all the electrical wires and removed all the labels. I spent the first 6 months rebuilding everything from scratch. I was working until midnight most nights, coming in on weekends, mapping out every process. But I didn't just map it out on paper. During my weekends at home, sitting at my personal computer, I developed a custom workflow automation dashboard. I called it the Vance Logistics System. It was a software tool that automatically synced shipping schedules with inventory databases and flagged potential delays before they happened. I wrote every line of code myself, on my own time, and paid out of my own pocket to register it with the United States Copyright Office under Title 17. To me, it was just a tool to make my own job easier so I could get home to my son Logan. Logan was only 5 then, and my wife had passed away from cancer just 2 years prior. I was a single dad trying to survive. I thought working hard and making the department run perfectly would secure our future. That's the promise they sell you. Work hard, keep your head down, and you will get recognized. For 8 years, I was the guy who made sure Nova Dynamics didn't fall apart. When our biggest client, Summit Enterprises, had urgent requests, I stayed late to handle them. I integrated my personal automation tool into the company's daily workflow, allowing them to use it under an implied license because it made my life easier. I became the institutional memory of the entire company. Then, 3 years ago, Walter Kingsley became my boss. He is a nice enough guy on the surface, about 48, very focused on high-level strategy and executive meetings. The problem was he never bothered to learn how our actual systems worked. Why would he? I had everything running so smoothly that he could spend his days playing golf and taking credit for our department's efficiency. But Walter had other plans. His niece, Clara Kingsley, had just graduated with an MBA from a top business school. She was 26 years old, smart on paper, but she had never worked a day in real operations. She had never handled a shipping crisis at 2 a.m. She had never spoken to an angry client. The promotion meeting happened on a Tuesday. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation showing how I had improved efficiency by 35% over the past 2 years, reduced operational errors by 60%, and personally managed the Summit Enterprise relationship that brought in $8 million annually. I was applying for the Senior Operations Manager role, a position that had been vacant for 6 months. Walter flipped through my presentation for maybe 2 minutes before setting it aside. "I appreciate everything you've done, Arthur," he said, looking at his watch instead of me. "But I've been thinking about the future of this department. We need fresh perspectives, new energy. Clara will be joining us next week as our new Senior Operations Manager." I sat there, feeling the blood run cold in my veins. Senior Operations Manager. That was the position I had been working toward for 8 years. "I see," I said, keeping my voice calm the way they trained us in the Navy. "And where does that leave me?" "You'll continue in your current role," Walter said with a reassuring smile. "Clara will need someone experienced to help her get up to speed. She has the academic background, but she needs to learn the day-to-day systems from you." It was a slap in the face. They wanted me to do the actual work while his niece got the title, the authority, and the salary bump. And then he added, "Clara starts on Monday, so maybe you can spend this weekend preparing some orientation materials and setting up her access to your workflow dashboard." That was the moment something clicked inside my head. I had spent 8 years giving this company my weekends. I had missed Logan's baseball games, his school plays, his parent-teacher conferences. I had sacrificed my time with my only son for a company that saw me as nothing more than a cheap engine to run their machine. I stood up, shook Walter's hand, and said, "I understand. Thank you for the feedback." I walked out of his office. But I didn't go back to my desk to start writing training guides. I walked straight to the parking garage, sat in my car, and made a decision. I wasn't going to quit in a rage. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was going to follow my official job description exactly as it was written, no more, no less. My official job description was incredibly basic. Manage daily operations within assigned scope. Coordinate with other departments as needed. Maintain client relationships within operational parameters. It was standard corporate template language. It didn't mention anything about managing the Summit Enterprises account personally, solving cross-department database crashes, or providing my proprietary Kirby copyrighted software dashboard to the company. I drove home that Tuesday evening and did something I hadn't done in 8 years. I turned off my work phone at exactly 5 p.m. When I walked through the front door at 5:30 p.m., Logan looked up from his homework in absolute shock. "Dad, why are you home so early?" he asked. I smiled, putting my keys down. "I decided my time is more valuable than I thought," I told him. "Do you want to go to the park and throw some baseballs?" The look on my son's face was worth more than any promotion Walter Kingsley could ever offer. Wednesday morning was the first real test of my new life. Normally, I would arrive at the office at 7 a.m. to prepare the daily operation briefing reports for Walter's 9 a.m. executive meeting. I did this because Walter didn't understand the logistics pipelines and needed me to tell him what to say. But this Wednesday, I sat in my kitchen, drank a second cup of coffee, and drove Logan to school. I walked through the office doors at exactly 9 a.m. As soon as I sat down, my office phone rang. It was Walter. "Arthur, where are the briefing notes for the 9 a.m. call?" he asked, his voice tense. I kept my voice polite. "Good morning, Walter. Preparing the executive briefing notes is not in my job description. It falls under the duties of the Operations Director's Administrative Assistant, a position that was cut last year. I need to focus on my core tasks today." There was a long silence on the line. "But you've always done them," Walter said, sounding confused. "I was doing them as a courtesy while the position was vacant," I replied. "But since the department is being restructured next week, I need to stick strictly to my assigned duties to ensure a smooth transition." "Have a great meeting." I hung up. By 10 a.m., the ripples were spreading. The executive meeting had apparently been a disaster. Walter had been unable to answer basic questions from Regional Director Gordon Mercer about shipping delays. At 11:30 a.m., Peter from procurement came to my desk looking stressed. "Arthur, the Summit Enterprises purchase order is stuck in the database. The system won't accept their new routing codes. Can you do that database override you always do?" I looked up at him. "That database override requires accessing the SQL backend, which is handled by the IT department. My job description only permits me to input data, not modify the database architecture." "But IT takes 3 days to process a ticket," Peter pleaded. "You always do it in 5 minutes. I had special authorization from previous management to expedite IT requests, but since I'm focusing strictly on my defined duties now, I cannot bypass standard protocols." "You'll need to submit a ticket to IT." Peter walked away, muttering under his breath. People were beginning to realize that the magic that kept the department running wasn't the company's systems. It was me constantly stepping outside my role to fix things. Wednesday evening, I met with my longtime friend Marcus, who is an intellectual property attorney. We sat in his office, looking at the copyright registration certificate I had obtained 4 years ago for the Advanced Logistics System dashboard. "The law is very clear," Marcus told me, tapping the paper. "Under 17 U.S.C. Section 106, as the registered owner of this software, you hold the exclusive rights to reproduce, distribute, and display it. Nova Dynamics only had an implied, royalty-free license to use it because you permitted them to. But since there is no written contract transferring ownership, and you built it entirely outside of work hours on personal hardware, you can terminate that implied license at any time." "Draft the letter," I said. On Thursday morning at exactly 8:30 a.m., the notification went out. I logged into the hosting server of my dashboard and suspended the company's active license keys. Instantly, every operations screen in the office went blank, replaced by a gray screen that read, "License suspended. Please contact copyright holder Arthur Vance." At 9:05 a.m., Walter Kingsley came storming toward my desk. His face was red and he was waving his phone. "Arthur, what is the meaning of this? The logistics dashboard is down. Nobody can track the Summit Enterprises shipments. Fix it immediately. I reached into my drawer and pulled out a formal legal letter, sliding it across the desk to him. "This is a formal notice of copyright infringement and revocation of implied license," I said calmly. Walter stared at the paper. "What are you talking about? You built this system for the company. I built this system at home, on my personal laptop, using my own resources, outside my working hours," I said. "I registered the federal copyright 4 years ago under 17 U.S.C. Section 106. Nova Dynamics was allowed to use it under an implied license because I was managing the department's day-to-day operations. However, with the restructuring and my role being restricted to basic duties, I am terminating that implied license effective immediately." "This is company property," Walter shouted. "You used it for work. Using a personal tool to help perform work does not transfer ownership to the employer under U.S. copyright law," I replied, my voice steady and professional. "There is no written agreement, and it was never a work-for-hire assignment. Any further unauthorized attempt by the company's IT department to access, clone, or bypass the lock on my software will be treated as willful rewrite infringement. Under federal law, that carries statutory damages of up to $150,000 per violation." Walter looked like he was about to choke. "You can't do this. I'll fire you." "That is your decision, Walter. But firing me will not grant Nova Dynamics the license to use my copyrighted property. And without the dashboard, your niece Clara is going to have to manually calculate the shipping routes for the Summit Enterprises Q4 rollout tomorrow. That's a 10,000-unit shipment. Doing it manually takes about 18 hours of manual spreadsheets." Walter snatched the letter and ran toward the executive offices. By afternoon, the office was in absolute chaos. Clara Kingsley was sitting at her new desk, surrounded by stacks of paper, looking completely lost. She didn't know the manual routing calculations because she had never done them. She kept calling other managers, but they were just as confused. I sat at my desk, processing simple data entry tasks. I left the office at exactly 5 p.m. That evening, Logan and I sat at the dining table. I helped him solve 15 algebra equations. He looked at me, chewing on the end of his pencil. "You're home early again, Dad," he said. "I am. And I'm going to be home early tomorrow too," I replied. He smiled, and for the first time in years, the heavy weight in my chest felt a little lighter. I was reclaiming my life, and the company was about to learn exactly what my silence was worth. Friday morning brought the storm I knew was coming. I arrived at the office at exactly 9 a.m. to find the reception area in complete chaos. The phones were ringing off the hook, and people were running between desks. As I walked toward my cubicle, the receptionist, Sarah, waved her arms at me. "Arthur! Thank God you're here. Gordon Mercer is in conference room B, and he's furious. Walter and Claire are in there too. They want you immediately." I set my laptop bag down, grabbed my notebook, and walked down the hallway. When I opened the door to conference room B, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Gordon Mercer, the regional director, was pacing near the window. Walter was red-faced, and Clara was sitting at the table, looking like she wanted to disappear. 2 members of the corporate legal team were also present, sitting with laptops open. "Ah, Arthur," Gordon said, stopping his pacing. "Come in, sit down. We have a massive crisis. Summit Enterprises has called an emergency meeting for 10:30 a.m. Their entire Q4 rollout of 10,000 units is failing because they have no shipping routing data, and our database is completely locked up. We're about to lose an $8 million account." Walter pointed a finger at me. "He did this, Gordon. He sabotaged our operations dashboard. He locked us out of the system. I want him fired and sued for damages." I remained calm, sitting down at the table and opening my notebook. "I didn't sabotage anything, Walter," I said, keeping my voice level. "The software dashboard is my personal copyrighted property. I registered it with the United States Copyright Office 4 years ago under 17 U.S.C. Section 106. You were using it under an implied license because I was managing the logistics. When you informed me that I wasn't ready for promotion and restricted my role to basic data entry, you terminated the operational context that justified that implied license. Therefore, I revoked it." The corporate lawyers exchanged quick glances. One of them, a woman named Rachel, leaned forward. "Mr. Vance, did you develop this software during company hours or using company equipment?" "No," I replied, sliding a folder across the table to her. "Here is the documentation. I wrote the code at home on my personal laptop, using my own development environment, entirely outside my 9 to 5 working hours. I paid the registration fees out of my own pocket. There is no work-for-hire agreement in my employment contract, and my official job description makes no mention of software development or maintaining custom automated tools. Rachel skimmed the papers, then looked at Gordon. She gave a slight nod. He's correct, Gordon. Under federal copyright law, without a written assignment of rights, the creator retains ownership. The company had an implied license, which he had the legal right to revoke. Walter looked like he was about to explode. This is ridiculous. He's holding us hostage. I am not holding anyone hostage, I said. I am simply adhering to my official job description. I am a database operator, not a software provider. Gordon held up a hand, silencing Walter. Let's focus on the immediate problem. Arthur, how do we fix the Summit Enterprises issue? The issue is a database synchronization mismatch, I explained. Summit updated their API yesterday, which broke our standard input system. My dashboard has a custom translation layer that resolves this automatically. Without the dashboard, you have to manually calculate the routing codes and input them line by line into the Summit portal. For 10,000 units, that will take about 18 hours of continuous, error-free work. Can you turn the dashboard back on and resolve it? Gordon asked. I checked my watch. It was 9:15 a.m. I have the Q4 Federal Regulatory Compliance Review scheduled for 10:09 a.m. It takes approximately 6 hours to complete and must be submitted to regulators by 5 p.m. today to avoid automatic fines and potential license suspension. My job description explicitly states I am responsible for compliance submissions. I cannot do both. The compliance review can wait, Walter yelled. Summit is an $8 million client. If we miss the compliance deadline, the federal government will suspend our transport license, I said, looking directly at Gordon. That means we won't be able to ship anything for any client, including Summit. It would shut down Nova Dynamics operations nationwide by Monday morning. The room went dead silent. Clara looked completely terrified. Gordon rubbed his temples. So we are stuck. What are our options? Well, I said, Clara is the new senior operations manager. The manual routing calculations are documented in Section 12 of the Operations Guide. It's a great opportunity for her to show her capability. She can start calculating the routes manually. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. I don't know how to calculate those routing codes. The guide talks about database variables I've never seen before. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid, I said to Gordon. By placing someone with no operational experience in a senior role, we've created a single point of failure. Gordon stared at Walter, his eyes cold. Walter, you assured me Clara was fully trained to handle this department. She is. She has an MBA. Walter stammered. She just needs Arthur to guide her. Gordon ignored Walter and looked back at me. Arthur, let's cut to the chase. What will it take to solve this crisis today the way you always have? In the past, I would have stayed here until midnight, ignoring my family to save this company, I said. But tonight is my son Logan's baseball game at 6:30 p.m. I have missed too many of his games, and I will not miss this one. I am leaving at 5 p.m. sharp. Furthermore, I have received a job offer from Zenith Logistics, Director of Operations, a 35% salary increase, and full remote flexibility. I am seriously considering it. Gordon's expression hardened. He looked at Walter, then at the lawyers. Walter, Clara, please step out of the room, Gordon ordered. Arthur, stay here. Rachel, you stay too. Walter looked shocked. Gordon, I am the director of this department. Out, Walter, Gordon said, his voice flat. Walter and Clara walked out, closing the door behind them. Gordon turned to me, his posture softening slightly. Arthur, let's talk. When the door closed behind Walter and Clara, Gordon sat down opposite me. He looked tired. Rachel, the lawyer, sat quietly, taking notes. Arthur, Gordon began. I want to be completely honest with you. We made a major mistake. We allowed personal connections to dictate a professional appointment, and we took your dedication and your intellectual property for granted. That was a failure of leadership on my part. I appreciate you saying that, Gordon, I replied. I'm not going to ask you to stay out of loyalty, Gordon said. You've given us 8 years of loyalty, and we didn't return the favor. But I want to make this right. If you reject the Zenith Logistics offer and stay with Nova Dynamics, here is what I am offering. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. First, you will be promoted to Director of Operations, effective immediately. The Operations Department will report directly to you, and you will report directly to me. Second, we will match the Zenith offer, a 35% salary increase, plus a performance bonus structure. Third, you will have full authority to restructure the department. That includes hiring 2 new senior operations managers of your choice. And what about Walter and Clara? I asked. Walter will be transitioned out of operational management entirely, Gordon said. He is being reassigned to a strategic advisory role with no direct reports. As for Clara, her appointment as senior operations manager is voided. If she wants to stay at Nova Dynamics, she will start as a junior operations associate. She will report to you, and she will earn any future promotion based strictly on merit. It was a very strong offer. It gave me the recognition, the salary, and the authority I had earned. But I didn't want to make a decision in the heat of the moment. I need the weekend to consider this, I said. I will give you my final answer on Monday morning. Gordon nodded. That's entirely fair. But we still have the Summit Enterprises issue today. Can we find a compromise to keep the client from walking at 10:30 a.m.? I thought about it for a moment. I will not unlock the server dashboard today, I said. But I will run the routing compiler locally on my personal laptop. I will generate the routing codes for the 10C unit shipment and output them to a spreadsheet. Clara will have to manually input those codes into the Summit portal. I will supervise her, but she has to do the actual data entry work. Meanwhile, I will complete the federal regulatory compliance review. Gordon looked relieved. Deal. Thank you, Arthur. Gordon called Walter and Clara back into the room. He explained the arrangement clearly. Walter looked defeated, his authority completely stripped away. Clara simply nodded, looking relieved that she wasn't going to be fired. For the next 7 hours, Clara and I worked side by side at a temporary workspace. I ran the compiler on my laptop, generating batches of routing codes, and handed them to her. She worked diligently, typing the data into the Summit portal. I watched her work. She was fast and she didn't complain. During a brief quiet moment, she looked over at me. Arthur, she said quietly, I want to apologize. I never asked my uncle to promote me over you. I knew you had the experience, but Walter told me it was how the corporate world worked. He said I needed to take the title and figure it out later. I was terrified of failing today. I looked at her, seeing the genuine anxiety in her eyes. Clara, you have a good academic background, I said. You're smart, but operations isn't something you can learn from a textbook. You have to see the systems break to understand how to fix them. If you're willing to start at the bottom and learn, you can be a great manager in a few years. Thank you, she said, and I could tell she meant it. By 4 p.m., the Federal Regulatory Compliance Review was 100% complete. I uploaded the final files to the government portal and received the confirmation receipt. Nova Dynamics transport licenses were secure for another year. At 4:45 p.m., Clara entered the final routing code for the Summit Enterprises shipment. The portal flashed green, indicating the Q4 rollout was fully authorized. The Summit account was saved. At exactly 5:00 p.m., I began packing my laptop and notebook into my bag. Walter was sitting in his glass office, staring blankly at his computer screen. He didn't look out as I walked past. As I drove toward the community park, the rain had stopped and the sun was breaking through the clouds. I arrived at the baseball field at 6:15 p.m. Logan was already in the dugout, wearing his team jersey. When he saw me walking toward the bleachers, his face lit up and he waved his glove at me. I sat down on the wooden bench, feeling the cool evening air. I was present. I wasn't checking my phone. I wasn't thinking about databases or shipping delays. I was just a father watching his son play baseball. Logan pitched a brilliant game, striking out 5 batters. Afterward, we drove to our favorite diner for burgers and milkshakes. Dad, Logan said, wiping ketchup from his chin. You really stayed the whole time. I did, buddy, I said. And I'm going to be at the game next Tuesday, too. He grinned. And I knew right then that no corporate victory could ever compare to this moment. But I still had a big decision to make before Monday morning. Nova Dynamics was offering me the director's seat, but Zenith Logistics represented a clean slate. I had 48 hours to decide what my future would look like. Over the weekend, I did a lot of thinking. I sat on my back porch watching Logan play catch with our dog and weighed my options. Zenith Logistics was a clean slate. No history, no baggage, just a fresh start. But Nova Dynamics was where I'd built my systems. It was where I knew every pipe, every valve, and every database table. More importantly, staying at Nova Dynamics as the director meant I could change the environment. I could ensure that what happened to me would never happen to anyone else in that office. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office at 8:30 a.m. I walked straight to Gordon Mercer's office and sat down. I'm accepting the position, Gordon, I said. But I have 2 non-negotiable conditions. Gordon sat back, folding his hands. Name them. First, I want absolute authority over hiring and internal promotions within my department, I said. I will not tolerate nepotism or political appointments. We promote based on competence and merit. Too many good, quiet people get passed over in corporate America because they don't play political games. I want to change that here, agreed, Gordon said without hesitation. What's the second condition? Second, I want to establish a mandatory cross-training program. What happened last week was a systemic failure. The company was crippled because only one person knew how to resolve the Summit Enterprises database sync. That is bad business. We will document every workflow and every team member will be trained on backup roles. No critical knowledge will exist in only one person's head. Also agreed, Gordon said. I'll have HR draft the contract modifications today. Welcome aboard, Director. The next 6 weeks were a whirlwind of restructuring. I started by formally licensing the Advanced Logistics System dashboard to Nova Dynamics under a structured corporate agreement. They paid a fair annual licensing fee, which went directly into a college fund for Logan. The code remained mine, but the company had secure, authorized access. I hired 2 highly competent senior operations managers from outside the company. They brought fresh perspectives and modern logistics methodologies, while I provided the deep historical knowledge of the company's databases. Together, we rebuilt the entire workflow from the ground up. The transition with Walter and Clara was surprisingly smooth. Once Walter was removed from daily operations, he actually performed well in his new strategic planning role. He was good at client dinners and high-level networking, where his lack of technical database knowledge didn't matter. Clara turned out to be a dedicated worker. Without her uncle shielding her from real work, she humbled herself and focused on learning. She spent her days handling basic logistics tracking, asking intelligent questions, and taking detailed notes. She didn't expect special treatment, and my senior team members reported that she was grasping the systems quickly. With 2 or 3 years of solid experience, she would make a fine operations manager. But the biggest change wasn't at the office. It was at home. 6 months after taking the director role, I was working at a sustainable, healthy pace. I arrived at 8:30 a.m. and left by 5:15 p.m. almost every day. My team was fully cross-trained. If a database crashed while I was at dinner, my managers had the tools and the authority to resolve it without calling me. One evening, Logan and I were sitting at the kitchen island. He was working on his algebra homework, and I was reading a book. He looked up, tapping his pencil against his chin. "So, Dad," he said, "are you like a really important boss now?" I smiled, closing my book. "I was always important, Logan. It just took the company a little while to figure it out." "Did you work all those late nights before just to prove you were important?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. I looked at my 13-year-old son, seeing the intelligence in his eyes. "Yeah, I think I did," I admitted. "I thought if I worked myself to death, they would have to value me. But I learned something important. The people who truly matter will see your value without you having to destroy your personal life to prove it. And the people who refuse to see your worth, well, sometimes you have to step back and let them experience what it's like when you're not there to carry the weight." Logan nodded, apparently satisfied with the answer, and went back to math problems. If you are listening to this story and you feel invisible at your job, remember my experience. Doing excellent work is important, but establishing boundaries is just as critical. Your value doesn't disappear just because your boss is too blind or too selfish to see it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop making their blindness your emergency. Step back and let them see exactly what happens when the gear stops turning. Today, my department is running better than ever, and I have a great relationship with my team. But my most important job is the one that starts at 5:30 p.m. when I walk through my front door, and that's a job I will never be too busy to perform.